3 bone-chilling horrors of abandoned places, the truth we should have never faced. The moon hung low, a ghostly specter casting an eerie glow over those forsaken structures, dilapidated echoes of lives once lived. Each crumbling wall whispered secrets, begging to be uncovered. 50 years had passed since the townsfolk had turned their backs on Thornhill Asylum, leaving it to the shadows. They said it was haunted, but haunted didn't even begin to cover it. Blood-curdling screams still echoed through empty corridors, and every now and then, at the witching hour, you could see the outline of a patient roaming the halls, searching for solace that had long since vanished. Nearby, the old coal mine lay buried beneath layers of dust and despair, claiming the lives of 40 miners in a tragic collapse. Legends showed that on stormy nights, the ghostly flickers of lanterns could be seen flickering inside. But what would cause fearless souls like Mark to dare enter such darkness? Treasure? Glory? Or perhaps the lure of a sinister truth everyone else fled from? Just imagining the echo of pickaxes against stone sent a shiver up his spine, a familiar twist of fear. And that smell, something like iron and decay. Rumors fluttered through town like leaves in the wind. There was talk of a third location, one that lay hidden beneath the rusted remains of an abandoned amusement park. They said the carousel still spun under the cover of night, but it wasn't just the music that haunted old Joe every time he passed. Chilling laughter, the sound of children long gone. It gave him the creeps. And yet, every local knew the stories, their eyes wide and glinting with danger. Hey, before we continue with this amazing story, I need to give you an important heads up. Many subscribers have reported that YouTube unsubscribed them without warning. Take a quick second to check the red button below to make sure you're still subscribed to the channel. I'd hate for you to miss any of the exclusive content coming soon. And while you're there, smash that like button, it really helps me out with the algorithm. Oh, and tell me in the comments, which city are you watching from? I love getting to know every amazing person who's part of this community. Your participation makes all the difference. Let's connect. The night grew darker, and the wind howled ominously, urging Mark and his friends forward. They stumbled upon a strange gate, unlatched yet menacing, leading into the depths of the insane asylum. The air crackled with an unseen energy, and their hearts hammered in their chests. Was it fear that drove them? A sense of adventure? Or perhaps an unexplainable compulsion to confront the dark truths of their own town's past? As they entered, the hair on their arms stood on end. Echoes of laughter rang hollow, replaced by a deep, chilling silence. With every step deeper into that forsaken place, each shadow felt alive. Something was watching. Something was waiting. The deeper they went, the more unanswered questions seemed to swirl around them like a thick fog. What horrors had occurred behind those walls, and were they ready to face the terrifying truths that lingered there? Mark could feel his heart race, not just from the thrill of adventure but from an instinctual fear that prickled the back of his neck. The darkness pressed in around them, making every whisper of the wind seem like a mournful cry trapped in the asylum's grasp. Each footfall echoed ominously, breaking the silence with a sound that felt unnaturally loud in this desolate place. "Are we sure about this?" Jen's voice trembled as she looked around, her flashlight flickering over the peeling paint and crumbling walls, casting long, dancing shadows. She was the first to break the silence, and her unease tightened the feeling in Mark's chest. "It's just the stories, they're all just stories," said Jake, trying to sound confident but failing to hide the hitch in his voice. Despite his bravado, he stepped a little closer to Mark, the chill of the abandoned asylum squeezing them tighter. They moved further inside, finding a hallway that seemed to stretch endlessly before them. The faint sound of water dripping echoed from somewhere deep within the building, punctuating the stillness like a distant heartbeat. Each drip made Mark jump, his imagination running wild with thoughts of what had happened here, the pain, the fear, the desperation of those poor souls that once called this prison home. Suddenly, a flicker of movement caught his eye. Mark whipped around, his breath catching in his throat. Nothing. Just shadows. It was nothing. But the sensation lingered, and he couldn't shake the feeling that they weren't alone. "Hey, did you guys see that?" he asked, trying to keep his voice steady. "See what?" Jen snapped back, her eyes wide with skepticism. She hesitated, biting her lip. "You're not seriously freaking out already, are you?" "I swear, something moved down the hall," Mark replied, his words tumbling out in a hushed urgency. The increasing pressure in his lungs made it hard to breathe, like the air itself was thick with unseen dread. Jake took a deep breath. "Let us just keep going." He turned towards the hallway ahead, where the darkness seemed to thicken, swallowing the light from their flashlights. As they continued, fear began to morph into something darker, something primal. The very air felt charged with a sinister energy, and the shadows twisted into frightful shapes. Mark felt a familiar tug of curiosity alongside the fear. What had happened in this place? The stories had only scratched the surface of the madness that seemed to linger like a ghostly miasma. They reached a door, its surface marred by age and neglect. The handle was cold beneath Mark's palm, and when he pushed it, the creaking of the wood sounded loud enough to wake the dead. As the door swung open, an overwhelming stench assaulted them like something long dead, festering in decay. Inside, the room revealed itself as a former patient's room, the remnants of tattered sheets strewn across an old hospital bed. A cracked mirror hung precariously on the wall, reflecting the oppressive gloom, and Mark felt a cold shiver of recognition as his reflection morphed into something unrecognizable. Another figure looming behind him in the glass. "Did you see that?" It was Jen again, her voice barely above a whisper. "Something's watching us." Mark spun around, but all he found was darkness. He could feel it close in around him, a suffocating presence, as though the asylum itself was alive, feeding off their fear. Panic encroached, and thoughts of retreat swirled through his mind. But a strange compulsion pushed him to stay, to uncover whatever monstrous truth lay beneath the surface. Suddenly, the distant echo of children's laughter broke the tension, piercing the heavy silence like a knife. It was chilling, and it seemed to come from somewhere deep within the asylum. As they turned towards the sound, Mark felt a jolt in his chest, a mix of dreaded curiosity and paralyzing fear. "Do you hear that?" he asked, his whisper barely carrying through the cold air. The laughter grew louder, tighter, wrapping around them like a noose. Facing the echoes of a past they couldn't understand, Mark and his friends stood frozen, at the threshold of what felt like a dark revelation. What had they awakened in Thornhill Asylum? The answer loomed ahead, the door closing slowly behind them as they took a step forward into the unknown. And as they crossed the threshold, the laughter faded, leaving only a suffocating silence, the kind you could feel in your bones. What darkness awaited them next? Would their journey into the past condemn them to the same horrors that had befallen so many others? The truth loomed just beyond their grasp. The silence was deafening, wrapping around them like a thick blanket. Mark felt a chill run down his spine as he stepped inside the room, the air smelling of mildew and decay. His heart thumped heavily in his chest, drowning out the whispers of his own thoughts. They had entered, but what lay ahead? Jen was the first to break the tension. "We can't just stand here," she said, her voice wavering but urgent. "We need to find out where that laughing came from." "Maybe it was just an echo," Jake replied, but even he sounded unsure. He shifted uncomfortably beside Mark, casting nervous glances toward the doorway as if expecting something to burst through. Mark hesitated. The sound of children's laughter felt like a cruel trick being played on them, a baiting whisper drawing them deeper into the asylum's twisted depths. "What if it's not just an echo?" he said, dread seeping into his voice. "What if someone or something is in here with us?" Bracing himself, Mark took a step further into the room, the floorboards creaking ominously beneath him. He aimed his flashlight toward the cracked walls, the light illuminating faded drawings, scribbled images of stick figures playing, or perhaps suffering. The air crackled around them, heavy with something unnameable, something dark. Then, as if summoned by their fear, the laughter returned. It was muffled and echoing, swirling through the hallways like a malevolent spirit. Mark's hands trembled as he gripped his flashlight tighter. "Let us go!" Jen exclaimed, her eyes wide and frantic. But as she turned, the door, which they had just entered through, slammed shut with a dull thud, sending waves of panic rippling through their group. Great, just great. Jake shouted, pounding on the door. Now we're trapped. Mark felt a rush of adrenaline and fear. Maybe if we push together, he suggested, but as he turned to the door, a shadow flickered in his peripheral vision. He froze. There it was again, movement. Dark and fleeting, dancing at the corner of his vision. Glancing around the room, he felt the walls close in. Do you see that? He murmured, his voice shaking. What? See what? Jen was now visibly shaken, her flashlight darting around the corners of the room, illuminating nothing but peeling paint and dust. In the flickering light, Mark caught sight of something shimmering in the corner, beneath a pile of old sheets. Swallowing his fear, he stepped closer, the sound of his breathing echoing in the small room. As he pulled the sheets aside, a small dusty doll was revealed, its glassy eyes staring blankly into the abyss around them. It must belong to one of the kids, Mark breathed, his heart racing. The laughter echoed again, louder, closer. But this time, it had morphed into sobbing, a raw, desperate sound that ripped through the silence. We need to get out, now. Jen yelled, pulling at Jake's arm. Just a second. Mark said, feeling an overwhelming necessity to unearth the truth. What if something happened to them? What if suddenly, the sobbing ceased, replaced by a weighty silence? A chill swept through the room, and Mark's breath caught in his throat as a whisper emerged from the shadows, just barely audible. Help me. The darkness seemed to pulse, as if alive, while Mark's heart raced wildly. The light from their flashlights flickered, casting wild shadows that twisted and turned as if celebrating their fear. Who is there? He called, unsure of whether he wanted an answer. In reply, a chilling rush of wind blew through the room, extinguishing his flashlight. The darkness swallowed their voices, and Mark felt clawing panic rise through him. They were utterly enveloped in blackness. When the lights flickered back to life, Jen and Jake were gone. Guys! The urgency in his voice pierced the silence, but only echoes echoed back to him. One thought slammed through his mind. They weren't alone, but whatever had taken them was lurking just beyond the reach of the weak beams of light. What had he awakened in Thornhill Asylum? A cruel whisper slipped through the darkness. Help me! It beckoned again, softer this time. Wrapping around him like a luring trap. Forward or back, it was a choice lined with dread. The truth was just within reach. But what would he have to face to uncover it? Mark's heart pounded in his ears, drowning out the feverish whispers of the shadows. Panic clawed at his throat as he stood alone in the suffocating darkness. Guys! He shouted again, but the words felt hollow, absorbed into the endless void. All he could hear was the taunting echo of the sinister laughter that lingered, slicing through the silence like a knife. Help me! The whisper echoed again, palpable and sweet, like a siren's song. It begged, it pleaded, pulling at something deep within him. But what lay beyond the grasp of his flashlight was pure terror. He felt it tremble beneath his skin. He took a hesitant step forward, every nerve firing with anxiety. The floor creaked, protesting under his weight. He had to find Jen and Jake, but where could they have possibly gone? The thought that they could be trapped by whatever darkness consumed this place sent a fresh wave of dread surging through him. Gathering his courage, Mark flicked the flashlight back on, the beam slicing through the darkness. Shadows danced chaotically around him, elongating grotesquely, but he pressed on. I need to find them, he whispered to himself, the words almost a mantra to stave off the growing fear. The faint echoes of sobbing surfaced again, this time mixed with a low, hollow groan that reverberated through the crumbling walls. Mark turned toward the source, feeling an undeniable pull, like gravity drawing him into the maw of the unknown. Without thinking, he raced towards the eerie sound, the promise of clarity mixing with an overwhelming sense of dread. The hallway stretched before him, a dark tunnel lined with peeling wallpaper and rusted metal railings. Faded photographs hung crookedly on the walls, the faces of forgotten souls gazing down with hollow eyes as if warning him, urging him to turn back. Instead, he pressed forward, each step made the shadows tremble, and soon the laughter began to rise again, a cacophony of joy intertwined with despair that sent chills rippling down his spine. "What do you want?" he shouted, the question hitting the walls and coming back at him, mocking and unanswered. Around the next bend, he spotted something sprawled across the floor, a body. Panic twisted inside him. He crept closer, praying for it to be Jen or Jake. His hands quaked as he reached down, only to find a raggedy doll, similar to the one he had uncovered earlier, its fabric worn and stained. He dropped it as if it burned him, the familiar horror flooding back. Suddenly, he heard a distinct thud, followed by a voice soft but firm. "Mark," but it was not either of his friends. The voice was laced with desperation, resonating with pain he couldn't bear to face. Mark's heartbeat escalated, each pulse a hammer against his chest as he realized he was moving deeper into the asylum's grip. "Stop!" he yelled, filled with a resolve that overshadowed the fear gnawing at him. "Where are you?" But something in his gut told him he was asking the wrong questions. In that moment, the lights flickered again, more violently this time, causing a low growl to rumble through the air. Mark felt the shadows closing in, a suffocating darkness that whispered secrets not meant for him. Then, with a deafening crash, the walls trembled, the sounds of running feet echoed around him. "Mark! Help me!" It was Jen. Her voice was coming from somewhere close. Panic pushed him forward, but it was not just her voice that haunted him. It was the realization that whatever was here, hiding within the gloom, wanted him too. With every ounce of strength, Mark sprinted toward the sound, and as he dashed into the next room, the reality of what lay ahead became horrifyingly clear. The sobbing intensified, morphing into a chorus of cries and laughter that filled the room. He stopped dead in his tracks, a cold sweat trickling down his spine. All around him, the remnants of a twisted game began to unravel, a haunting spectacle of memories locked away, each face echoing their anguish. And at the center of it all, he could make out two figures bound to the ground, illuminated under flickering light. "Help us!" they begged. The revelation slammed into him with the force of a battering ram. The asylum wanted them all. Mark's blood ran cold, and as he turned to escape, the doorway vanished, folding into itself. Trapped, with whispers clawing at his sanity, he understood one chilling truth: he wasn't just facing whatever tormented this place. He was becoming part of it. Would he manage to save them, or would they be swallowed whole by the horrors of Thornhill Asylum? The room closed around him, the walls pulsating with a life of their own. Mark stumbled back, the frantic cries of Jen and Jake wrapping around him like a noose. "No, no!" His voice came out hoarse, swallowed by the ominous laughter still echoing through the chamber. The figures before him became clearer, their faces drenched in fear. Jen's wild eyes met his, desperation spilling over. "Mark, you have to help us," she pleaded, her voice trembling. He could see the ropes binding her wrists, digging into her skin, their crimson lines stark against her pale flesh. His mind raced. How had it come to this? His body moved instinctively, desperation driving him closer, though every instinct screamed to flee. What happened? He gasped, reaching for the rope constricting her. "Stop!" Jake's voice rang out, sharp and urgent. "You don't know what you're doing." Panic struck through Mark. He hesitated, looking from his sister to Jake, who was also bound in a nightmare of fear. "Get away from her." Before Mark could react, the shadows stirred, coalescing into something more substantial, almost solid. A figure emerged, formed by darkness itself, eyes glimmering like distant stars. It was a twisted caricature of humanity, grinning with cruel delight. "Oh, how cute," it cooed, the voice a mocking whisper that made Mark's skin crawl. "Trying to save them? This is my game, not yours." Mark's heart raced. "What do you want?" he shouted, adrenaline coursing through him. The figure giggled, each laugh sending ripples through the air. "I want to play," it replied, taking a step forward. The shadows followed, creeping closer, wrapping around Mark's ankles like pythons. He could feel their icy touch, a sensation that clawed at his resolve. Win, and you get to take them home. Lose and well, you'll be joining their little party. Mark. Jen cried, terror cracking her voice. Get us out of here. The figure tilted its head, delight dancing in its dark eyes. You must choose, dear boy. One life for another. Who will you save? Choose wisely, or everyone will suffer. He felt the walls close in, his chest tightening. Who to save? Every second fractured into eternity, their desperate faces swirling through his mind. He took a deep breath, recalling the moments they shared, the laughter, the fights, but mostly the love. I can't choose, he said, his voice breaking. I won tea. Then you've already lost, the figure hissed, a dark promise laced in its voice. With a flick of its wrist, the shadows surged forward, wrapping tighter around him. Mark struggled, fighting against their suffocating grip, but he felt himself slipping, the darkness clawing deeper into his soul. The laughter exploded around him, fading into a haunting melody wrapped in despair. In that moment of utter hopelessness, Mark's eyes flicked to Jen, anger flashed across her face. Mark, don't give in. Fight! She yelled, her strength igniting something inside him. With a surge of defiance, Mark twisted, calling upon every ounce of will he had left. Shadows writhed and hissed in response, and in that moment, he felt power thrumming through him, a primal force that dared him to rise. Get your hands off me! Mark roared, pushing back against the dark creature that loomed before him. The room vibrated, reality shifting, cracking under the pressure of his fight. Suddenly, the world erupted into blinding light, and for a brief moment, he felt weightless. Then came the deafening silence that it was too quiet. In the blink of an eye, he found himself standing in the center of a vast, empty space. The shadows receded like a tide, leaving only the echo of laughter lingering in the air. Where? His heart raced, dread pooling in the pit of his stomach. In front of him lay crumbled remnants of the asylum, but no sign of Jen or Jake. A chill crept along his spine. What have you done? He whispered into the silence, fear prickling at his skin. Did you really think it would be that easy? A voice whispered, curling around him. He turned to find the figure back, smeared in ink and malice, grinning wider than ever. The game has just begun. His mind raced. Where were they? How could he pull them from the grip of darkness? And worse yet, what had he unleashed in his desperation? As the figure advanced, Mark braced himself, ready to confront whatever nightmare lay ahead. With a single shuddering breath, he gripped the fading hope inside him. Let us play. The truth he needed to unveil was veiled in an even darker reality, one that awaited with silent glee. Would he find the courage to rescue his friends, or had he sealed their fate in the asylum's eternal darkness? Mark's heart thundered in his chest. The figure loomed closer, shadows flickering like tongues of fire. What have you unleashed? He demanded, voice steady despite the fear gripping him. But deep down, the memory of Jen's and Jake's terrified faces drove him forward. He couldn't shake the feeling that time was slipping away. Ah, that's the beauty of it, isn't it? The figure replied, its voice dripping with malevolence. You're in a world where choices are useless, where the unwary become playthings. You're trapped in the web of my making. The vast emptiness around him warped, pulsating like a beating heart, and Mark took a step back, instinctively pushing against the oppressive waves of darkness. Where are they? He shouted, echoing against the walls of the empty space. What do you want from me? The figure chuckled, low and sinister. To play the ultimate game, my dear boy. A game where the rules twist like a knife in the dark. Only one can emerge unscathed. Suddenly, a cold wind swept through the space, carrying whispers that swirled around him like smoke. He couldn't decipher the frantic voices, but they chilled him to the bone, filling him with dread. The realization hit these could be the voices of those who had walked this path before him, victims of the same sinister trap. Face your fears, the figure taunted, its eyes glimmering with sadistic glee. Only then might you grasp the truth that eludes you. Choose one and I shall release them. Release who? Mark's voice was barely a whisper. What truth? The figure's grin widened. Their very existence is tied to your deepest fears, Mark. It is their pain or your safety. What will it be? Mark felt the floor beneath him tremble as visions began swirling through the mist, horrific images of Jen and Jake trapped in nightmarish scenarios, Jen lost in an endless maze of chains, and Jake being engulfed by shadowy hands. A sob caught in his throat, he had to save them. But saving them meant surrendering to his darkest fears. Closing his eyes, he remembered sunny afternoons, laughter echoing through the halls of their old home, a family forged in love and resilience. No! He shouted, bolting upright. I want to let you toy with me. I refuse to let fear dictate my choices. Ah, but it's too late for bravado. The figure lunged forward, shadows racing at him like a stampede. You've already walked into my snare. Mark's chest tightened. The edges of the realm danced, warping under the pressure of the figure's evil magic. He focused deep within himself, struggling against the pull of despair. There had to be a way he wouldn't let them suffer because of his hesitation. Suddenly, clarity pierced the gloom, illuminating a path hidden among the chaos. I don't need to fight you, he realized. I just need to confront the truth, my truth. The shadows hesitated, momentarily flickering, and he pressed on, embracing the dread clawing at him. I fear losing them. I fear being powerless. Mark bellowed as the darkness swirled around him, trying to bind him once more. Yet, this time, rather than shrinking from it, he faced the sensation head-on. But I also fear never trying to save them. As the shadows recoiled, the figure shrieked, furious. You dare defy me? I dare. Mark felt warmth radiating from within, pushing back against the suffocating dark. And I'll never stop fighting. In an explosion of light, Mark surged forward, the raw energy of his scream crackling through the dimness. Shadows twisted into grotesque shapes, but he pressed on, unwilling to back down. Suddenly, the world burst open around him, revealing echoes of Jen and Jake's cries. The sight of their freedom flickered just beyond reach. Mark's resolve hardened, he would tear down the walls of this twisted game or die trying. But then a chilling thought struck him. What if the figure was telling the truth? What dark bond connected their lives? As he reached for the light, shadows threatened to consume him once more. What is the truth? He called out desperately into the void. But the only answer was a mocking laugh that reverberated, a sinister reminder that darkness always lurked just out of sight. Would Mark discover the truth before it was too late? Or had he already lost more than he could bear? Mark's heart raced as the mocking laughter faded, its echoing sound fading into an uneasy stillness. The shadows grew thicker and colder, almost materializing as tendrils that grasped around his ankles, pulling him down. He fought against it, but each breath drew in the chilling void that threatened to swallow him whole. Focus. He urged himself, feeling the weight of despair tighten around him like a noose. This was no time to falter. They need you. He called out Jen's name first, desperation spilling from his lips like a prayer, then Jake's, both names resonating in the oppressive silence that followed. But the shadows twisted into vile mockeries of their faces. The figure laughed again, a low, chilling sound that burrowed into his brain. You think simple names can pull them from the jaws of my creation? They're bound by the choices you refuse to make. Mark's eyes darted around, searching for a way to turn the tide. Echoes of their cries haunted him, blending with the sinister laughter. You think this is all a game? He shouted. I want to play by your rules. The figure stepped forward, its form shifting, warping into shadows that curled around sharp features, eyes glowing with a malevolent hunger. It is not a game, dear Mark. It's your reality. Avoidance will only lead you deeper into suffering. With a surge of clarity, Mark realized this was feeding on his fear. He had to confront the depths of it, face the darkness that dwelled within him. You are not my master. He plunged forward into the chaotic swirl of night, drawing upon every memory of laughter, love, and the shared joy of the lives that meant everything to him. The shadows hissed, recoiling from the brightness of his thoughts. And for a heartbeat, the darkness flickered, revealing a glimmering path woven through the chaos. It glimmered even under the thick despair. He grabbed it. "Your fear won't hold me," he yelled, pushing through the snaking shadows. He felt the radiant warmth of hope coiling around his heart. Suddenly, the whispers transformed, morphing from despair to urgency. "Help us!" A voice echoed, a mixture of pain and hope that cut through the darkness. The shadows writhed, morphing violently as he hastened toward the sound. It was Jen and Jake, their silhouettes emerging from the surrounding gloom, eyes wide with fear. "Mark!" Jen cried, and the despair in her voice nearly shattered him. "We're trapped. You have to find the truth." Mark halted, realizing this wasn't just about fighting the figure, it was about uncovering the truth, the dark secret that tangled their fates. "What truth? What do you mean?" Before he could shake the urgency of the question, tendrils of darkness surged toward him, grasping at his limbs, pulling him away from them. "No!" he shouted, straining against the pull. "Jen! Jake! Each of us carries a piece." Jen called out, desperation creeping into her tone. "You must choose to confront the fears that bind us." Mark's heart lurched. The figure sneered from the edge of the shadows. "Choose, Mark. What truth will you face? What fear will you confront to save them?" He felt the weight of 1,000 choices strangling him. Each path teemed with uncertainty, filled with the ghosts of emotions he had buried for too long. Could he bear the burden of their pain to free them from this torment? "Know that once you confront me," the figure rasped, "the truth will change everything. You may wish you hadn't at all." With a roar that echoed through the abyss, Mark squared his shoulders. "Then let us uncover the truth. I choose to face it all." As he stepped forward, the shadows around him quaked. A blinding light surged from his heart, forcing a crack through the darkness. Visions danced in the glow, fragments of memories, dreams, and the things he feared the most, but the ground trembled, and the shadows thrashed violently around him. "You're not ready," the figure shrieked, a final tug of war between fear and courage. Mark could almost taste freedom, but the figure surged against him with one last, catastrophic blow. Would he be able to hold on to that light as the storm raged? Or would he, too, be consumed by the very darkness he aimed to confront? The world around Mark erupted into chaos, the shadows spinning like a cyclone, each tendril lashing out, clawing at his resolve. With every ounce of strength he had left, he concentrated on that blinding light within him, his hope and love, a beacon against the storm. "Stop!" he screamed, weaving between the dark masses, his heart pounding like a war drum. He had to believe. If this was his reality, he could create a new one. The laughter became a cacophony, each mocking note designed to unravel his courage. But he focused harder, channeling his memories of Jen and Jake, their laughter, their shared moments, the mundane triumphs that felt monumental in hindsight. It fueled him, knitting together the frayed strands of his bravery. "Your pain doesn't define you," he shouted into the swirling darkness. "I see their faces, I hear their hearts. I want to let you take them." The figure's face contorted with rage, twisting into grotesque shapes that mirrored Mark's deepest fears. "You can't save them, Mark. You still haven't overcome the trials of your past." Mark's chest tightened, but he steadied his breath. Shadows lunged, snapping at his heels, but every time they tried to trip him up, he pushed back harder. "Then tell me," he demanded. "What do I need to confront? Show me." The figure paused, its swirling maw of darkness stuttering for a heartbeat. "You already know," it hissed, its words slithering around him like smoke. And suddenly, memories surged, the sound of his father's disappointed voice, the feeling of failure crushing him like a weight. He recalled how he had run away from responsibility, from facing the truth of his own shortcomings. This wasn't just about them, it was about him. No, he whispered, understanding dawning like the first light of dawn creeping through the dark. I've been running from my own fears. The shadowy figure laughed again, but this time, it held a hint of uncertainty. Embrace them, then. Face the truth, and they will be free. You may not like what you find. Fueled by the realization, Mark focused on the light within him and let himself plunge into that memory the night he had disappointed his father most. Instead of recoiling, he reached out to it. Swallowed by the darkness, he grasped onto the pain, the shame he had buried. I forgive you, Mark muttered, feeling the warmth of compassion seep into him. I forgive myself. The shadows quivered, the swirling darkness faltering as the warmth of acceptance blasted outward. Light exploded from him, illuminating the twisted figure, a grotesque mask of his own making. You think mere forgiveness is enough? The figure screeched, yet its voice carried a tremor of doubt. Mark stood tall, heart racing but firm. I choose to confront my past, to embrace what haunts me. Whatever is left in the darkness, I will face it. The pressure around him shattered, the shadows recoiling as they slackened their hold on Jen and Jake. He gasped, seeing their outlines clearer now, hope lighting up their frightened faces. Mark! Jen cried, stretching her trembling hand toward him, just as he reached out for them. A howling wind swept through, the climate of despair shifting once more. You can't run from the truth, the figure bellowed, its features distorting violently. I will consume you all. Mark felt a sudden surge of power. No! He yelled, racing toward his friends. We will not be consumed. We are more than our fears. But just as their fingers were about to meet, a blinding flash filled the room. This time, it was not the light from Mark, it was a raw darkness, a pulse of rage shattering through their collective resolve. He saw flickers of his friends, fragments of their own fears playing like fragmented scenes in the air between them. Could they confront their own demons, or would they fall prey to this relentless darkness as well? The storm seethed, and Mark's heart raced with dread. Would they all be pulled into the abyss, or could they emerge together, forged in the fires of their fears? The darkness surged, pressing against Mark like 1,000 pounds of dread. His heart thundered in his chest as he felt the world teeter on the edge of oblivion. An icy chill swept through the air, wrapping around him, threatening to choke the light he had just rekindled. Mark! Jen's voice sliced through the chaos, high and desperate. What just happened? The shadows writhed, twisting into demonic shapes that flickered in and out of visibility. They flanked Jen and Jake, closing in like vultures on prey. Their eyes, wide with fear, reflected the swirling blackness surrounding them. Stay close! Mark shouted, pushing through the oppressive weight of his own fear. We can't let it separate us. But the entity laughed, an inhuman sound that filled the narrow space, echoing off jagged fragments of reality. What a noble wish, but can your bond withstand the truth? The figure morphed into an embodiment of Mark's past, transforming into faces he recognized, friends he'd betrayed, opportunities he'd squandered. Each face wore an expression of sorrow, accusing him silently. No! Mark cried, regretting every moment of negligence that led to this confrontation. You're not real. You're just shadows born from my doubts. Is that so? The figure coiled closer, its breath cold and foul. What about Jake's panic and Jen's despair? Are those just mere echoes of your imagination? Mark turned, locking eyes with his friends. He saw Jake's brow furrowed in resignation, the ghost of the boy he once was flickering to life. Jen's hand trembled as she clutched her chest, her fear palpable. They had to stand together, or they would crumble. We're stronger than this. He shouted, defiance clawing back at the darkness. Share your fears. Don't let it own you. The shadows paused, almost as if taken aback. A flicker of uncertainty passed through the imposing figure, momentarily illuminating its form. Just for that instant, Mark felt a crack in the monster's armor. Jen took a deep breath. Jake, what are you afraid of? The shadows thrummed as if responding to Jen's encouragement. I am afraid of failing again, Jake said, his voice shaky yet resolute. Afraid that I won't be enough. Then let us face the truth together, Mark replied, spreading his arms wide. Everyone fails sometimes. But together, we can rise from it. Jen nodded, visibly shaking but standing tall. I'm scared of losing you too. Of being left alone. Something inside Mark swelled at her words. He felt her fear right there with his own, but with it, an overwhelming resolve. You won't. None of us will ever be alone again. The figure shrieked, the anger soaring in intensity. It lunged toward them, its shadowy hands grasping to snatch away this newfound unity. Sparks of color burst from their joined hands, illuminating the dimness. Mark felt the light burning within him, strengthened by the fierce loyalty of his friends. No matter how deep the darkness, he shouted, we will shine. The shadows recoiled, thrashing against the flames of friendship. Mark felt as if he were anchored to a lifeboat in a stormy sea, clutching tightly to Jen and Jake. They were drawing from one another's fears, transforming them into something far more powerful, unbreakable bonds of trust and love. But just as Mark thought they had gained the upper hand, a deafening roar erupted from the darkness, tearing through the room. It promised a cataclysm, a finale that only added to the uncertainty wrapping around them. Fools! The figure screeched, fury boiling over. You've merely delayed the inevitable. Your truths will be your undoing. The shadows swirled tighter, constricting around them as flickering visions of their past failures flashed through the air. Mark gasped, the weight of his regrets slamming into him like waves crashing on a shore. Was their collective strength enough to combat the tide that threatened to wash away everything they had fought for? Would they shatter under the burden of their truths, or could they wield them as weapons against this looming darkness? The storm raged on, leaving them teetering on the edge of chaos. As the shadows surged forward, Mark sensed a terrifying truth still lurked, a truth that had yet to be unveiled. Would they have the courage to confront it together? Or would they find themselves consumed, lost to the shades of their own despair? Mark's heart pounded heavily in his chest as the shadows writhed and twisted around him, pulsing with an energy that threatened to consume everything in its path. With Jen and Jake by his side, he felt a flicker of hope pierce through the dread. They stood resolute, united against the dark creature's merciless laughter. Yet, the weight of their fears threatened to drag them down into a yawning chasm of despair. Together! Mark shouted, determination fueling his voice. We need to remember our strength. The darkness paused, an unsettling stillness enveloping them. The figure snarled, morphing into the faces of their past failures, moments of grief, of loss, every betrayal echoing around them, tagging them with doubt. But instead of cowering, Mark drew upon the memories that made them stronger, the laughter shared in sunlight, moments of joy that blossomed in their childhood. Say their names. Mark urged. Remind yourself of what keeps you fighting. Jen. She shouted, her voice unwavering. You are brave and loyal. You've always fought to keep us together. I'm scared, she admitted, glancing at her own reflection in the shadows, but I refuse to let it win. We are our choices, they form us, none of these weaknesses define us. Jake. Mark called out. You are resilient, smarter than any fear. Jake's eyes narrowed, brimming with defiance. I'll embrace it. I've failed, yes, but I learned. This isn't over. He clenched his fists, body tense, the entity writhed angrily, shadows lashing out like whips, but they were bolstered by words, strengthened in resolve. Together, they recited their fears and their joys, creating a sound like a fierce storm. We are stronger than you think. They cried in unison. Suddenly, the grotesque figure halted, its form flickering like a dying flame. No. Stop. I thrive on despair. It shouted, rage spilling over, eyes wide with disbelief. The shadows slackened, allowing a warm light to seep in, enveloping them in a cocoon of solidarity, Mark could feel it. The air shifted, a powerful surge of collective strength building around them, like a radiant shield reflecting their courage and love. "Let us change the narrative," Mark yelled, a smile spreading across his face. "You don't own us anymore." With one determined push, they all moved together, shouting, "We will not be defined by darkness." In an explosive burst of brightly colored light, the shadows shrieked, recoiling from the power of their connection, fracturing and collapsing until the cruel figure let out one final, tortured scream before dissolving into nothingness. As the last echoes of despair disappeared, light flooded the room, illuminating every corner. Jen and Jake felt the ropes bindling them snap away, freeing them from the nightmarish grip. They stumbled into each other's arms, tears mixing with relieved laughter. "I thought we'd lost you," Jen whispered, holding Jake tightly. Mark joined them, overcome with emotion. "We're together now. We did it." But the joy was tinged with understanding. They had faced an abyss, forged in fear, but it was the unbreakable bond of trust and love that had saved them. Mark glanced at the remnants of Thornhill Asylum, and a sense of peace washed over him. It was a place steeped in sorrow, but they had reclaimed their story, triumphed against suffocating darkness. Looking towards the entrance, freedom beckoned. "Let us go home," he exclaimed. As they stepped into the cool night air, the moon cast a soft glow, illuminating their path forward. The stars shimmered above like a promise, a reminder that even when darkness threatens, there's always light to guide the way. "I can't believe we survived that," Jake chuckled nervously, shaking his head in disbelief. "More importantly, we faced our fears," Jen added, her eyes gleaming with determination. "No more hiding from the truth." Mark nodded, the weight of their shared experience settling around them like a warm blanket. "We each carry a piece of this story," he said softly. "And it's made us stronger." With hearts full of gratitude and hope, they took their first steps into the future together and unafraid, leaving behind the shadows of Thornhill Asylum. But as they walked away, chirping crickets back in their lives, a whisper fluttered inside Mark's mind, "Face your truth always." He could carry it with him now, less burden than lesson. What lay ahead was uncertain, but so full of potential. It wasn't the end, it was just the beginning. Together, they would weave their new narrative, one of hope, resilience, and friendship. Now, it is your turn to join the journey. You need to subscribe immediately to the channel so you don't miss the next exclusive stories. Every tale is waiting to be unveiled just for you. Smash the like button now. Each click feeds the algorithm, allowing more amazing stories to reach people just like you. Flood the comments section with your reactions and theories about this thrilling conclusion. I want to hear what you think. It matters, and don't wait even one more second to share this video with at least 5 friends who need to see this conclusion. The adventure continues, and you can be part of it. Thank you for being here with us.